Welcome to the Miracle of America Museum Constitution display. Actually, this is where the name of the museum, part of the name originated, because the Constitutional Convention at Philadelphia was referred to as a miracle at Philadelphia. And it actually, when you think about it, was quite a miracle that 56 men could get together and agree on something so simple and yet complex that it provided a pattern for other countries and made us the most successful and freest nation on earth. Now, we use a lot of symbolism in this display. We have the huge logging chain here, which symbolizes Thomas Jefferson's quote about binding men down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. Those men he was talking about were the men of Congress, to keep them from being mischievous in passing laws that would restrict our freedom. The other symbolic thing in this display is a huge collection of scales, anything from gold scales, egg scales, platform scales, spring balances. Basically all scales were referred to as balances. And there was a standard to check and make sure that those all weighed the same. And the balanced form of government was what the Founding Fathers sought for. And so this is one of our most important displays in the museum. Included in the separation of powers and the balanced form of government, the Founding Fathers wanted the vertical separation. Notice on our graph there, all power to the people. Pretend like this is a teeter-totter, and we already talked about to the right is anarchy, to the left is tyranny, and we already talked about if we acted more responsibly, we could pull the government back and both coming to the center. But then we needed also a vertical separation, all power to the people, individual level, next to family, next to the city, and then the state, and then the national. Reserve itself for just the most severe problems. So let's use the analogy of at school you cut your finger and you're bleeding. Do you ask President Trump to fix it? No, that's ridiculous. It probably costs millions of dollars. You probably bleed to death by the time you got done with all the paperwork. So you apply direct pressure and stop that bleeding yourself. But if it's bleeding all over your desk and getting kind of messy, your paperwork and so forth, you say, "Teacher, could I have a Band-Aid?" And she'd probably wash your finger off, put a Band-Aid on it. If it was worse than that, maybe they'd call the school nurse. If worse than that, they'd call your parents and they'd come and get you and try and fix it. If worse than that, the doctor. Well, then if the doctor says, "Oh, this is really bad, we've got to take you to the ER, emergency room." So you see, you solve your problems at the lowest possible level, probably just as good, although maybe if you did it yourself, it wouldn't be quite as clean, but you probably live. But anyhow, the Founding Fathers believed in solving a problem on the lowest possible level. Today, if there's any sort of a disaster, the governors are immediately calling for the federal government to solve their problems. That's wrong. That's not cost effective. It takes a long time, and a lot of the people don't know. I mean, there might be a catastrophe up in Alaska, and well, the government will maybe ship some refrigerators up to them, thinking that they need them. Hey, it's ridiculous. So the Founding Fathers got their example out of the scriptures. In Exodus, when Moses was leading the Israelites out of bondage, the people were bugging Moses with all their silly little problems. They were wearing him out. Well, Jethro, his father-in-law, said, "Well, why don't you set up captains over tens, 50s, hundreds, and thousands, and let them rule the lesser problems and reserve yourself for just the most severe situations." So the Founding Fathers believed in Scripture. They believed in God, and they took example from that. They gave God credit for having inspiration in drafting the Constitution. We need a return to that. It's not a living document, it's a standard, it's solid. Just like the scales are a standard. They're regulated, they're adjusted by a standard. So that the Constitution is that standard. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the Miracle of America Museum.